Good morning, or I should say, well, it is morning. It's pretty late. It's about 2:30 or 2:26 on a Saturday night. I just this is an impromptu video. It was something I'd been hearing about, and I just felt like, well, why not talk about it? Maybe up for a little while. It's pretty late, and I had a gig tonight in Holton, Maine, which is quite a ways away, but it wasn't as far as I thought, and I was going to stay down there, but then I was like, well, I think I could drive home. So I did, and I made really good time. So I came home, got home a little less than an hour ago, so it was pretty nice. So this show is on a new movie I've been hearing a lot about. And at first I wasn't very excited by the prospect of seeing it. It wasn't a movie I thought would be that interesting. And I actually, to be honest, I didn't really have a desire to really see it. And that is the movie that I'm going to be talking about. Is this new movie that just opened? I think it came out this weekend, and it's called The First Omen. And it's acting like it's a when I well I should back up a few minutes or a few a little bit in the time frame. I went to the movies a while back and I saw the trailer for The First Omen. And I thought it looked okay, it looked kind of generic. I thought, it had a couple of interesting things about it. And I kind of thought it was essentially like a new, 2024 remake of the classic The Omen film, which is a movie I really want to do a review on, and I will do a review on. I'm going to try to really see, I do want to see The First Omen in the theater, so I'm going to try to go see it in the theater. But before that happens, I'm going to try to sneak in and do a review of The Omen, because I have not seen The Omen in a wicked, wicked long time. And, I've always loved that movie. I have a few different copies of it. I don't have it on Blu-ray, but I do have a few copies of it on DVD. And I think it's definitely a horror classic. I mean, without a doubt, it's an old school horror classic from the '70s, starring Gregory Peck, about the birth of the Antichrist. It's an amazing film, and it's a kind of a shocking movie too. I remember that movie really scared me when I was a kid, and it still holds up. It's been a few years since I've seen it. It's probably been a couple of years. But I will try to sneak in a review of The Omen just to kind of recap. And I want to watch it again and then do a show on it and try to lead into, hopefully I can get to see it or get to watch it before I go to see this new Omen movie, which I'm not sure when I can, but I'm hoping I can do it soon. So the last time I was in the theater, I think it was the last movie I saw in the theater was Dune 2, which is a phenomenal movie. And one of the trailers that was shown was The First Omen. And I thought, okay, like again, I thought it looked okay. I thought it looked, pretty decent at times. But then I also thought to myself, what's the point? And the impression that I got from this movie, or from the trailer, was that it was a 2024 version of The Omen. It was essentially going to be a remake. That's kind of what my first impression was of the trailer and of hearing about this movie. So I was kind of like, oh, why bother? I just, the cynical part of my brain just kind of went off on a tangent. And I was like, you know what? I don't really want to see this. It's like, why can't Hollywood create new storylines, new ideas? Because when you think of Richard Donner directed the original Omen, and great director, of course, directed the first Superman movies, the first two actually. Got fired on the second one, and he made the Lethal Weapon movies. He's made a lot of great movies in his career. And so, when The Omen first came out, it was a new movie. It was a new idea. It was a fresh kind of spin on the whole, like, notion of what evil is. And it was like a new thing. It was fresh. And I was like, why can't Hollywood do that anymore? And again, there are a lot of great films that still do come out, but I always feel like, it's just, when you look at those decades of the 60s, 70s, and early 80s, you just can't beat it. That's when all these new, great films were coming out. They were all like breaking a lot of new ground, especially in the 70s. And they were taking, studios, directors were taking chances. And I feel like, okay. So I started thinking, why are they going to remake this movie? There have been exceptions to the rule. Two movies that I really, really love that are remakes is the Texas Chainsaw Massacre remake, which I did not really like when I first saw it. And then I saw it again, because I'm such a huge Texas Chainsaw Massacre fan. And then I saw it again, and I fell head over heels for that movie. I absolutely love that movie. I love... The original is one of my all-time favorite movies of all time, and I was blown away by how good the original was. I mean, the remake. And it was very different. It was based, obviously, on the original story and the original characters, but it was really fresh, innovative, and it was generally it was a terrifying movie. It was really a great horror film. And the other, one other movie that I think is kind of the exception is the Evil Dead remake, which, of course, was directed by Sam Raimi. Iconic movie. A movie that you can never say enough good things about, even though it has been talked to death. One of the greatest movies ever. And Fede Alvarez did essentially a remake or a reimagining. And I was really skeptical by that movie when it came out. And I was kind of late to the party, and I eventually saw it, and that movie just blew me away, and it automatically made me pay attention to everything that director Fede Alvarez has done, and because that's an extraordinary movie. The remake is just insane and completely original and exciting. So those are two big examples for two iconic horror movies where there was a real successful attempt, or I shouldn't say an attempt because it was perfectly executed as far as I'm concerned, but two remakes of classic films that were just awesome and breathtaking in their own right. So it does happen, but a lot of the times that's two movies, and I know there are other films, but those are two movies I can think of off the top of my head where it's so successful, so successfully done. The stars are aligned, and you're getting the classic story where those movies are coming from, or what those movies are kind of based on, but they're giving you something really, really new and exciting. And generally, as a horror movie, you want to be scared. You want to have the envelope pushed, and both of those movies do that extremely well. So, those are two examples of it being really successful. So, I kind of, wrote off this idea, and it was something in the past by this point where I was like, I don't really have an interest in seeing the First Omen. I just think it's just going to be, another remake that's probably not that good, and it's going to rely on this formulaic thing of where there's just going to be an abundance of jump scares, and things are going to be a little bit more calm, I should say a little bit more sanitized and what have you. So, and then the other day I happened to be on YouTube, and I was watching some videos, and I came across I can't remember where I first heard about it. Actually, I think it was Chris Stuckman, who is a big YouTube guy, and I really like his reviews a lot. He is, I watch his channel a lot because he really stays up on a lot of newer horror films, contemporary horror films. And again, I'm pretty much old school when it comes to horror movies, but I like to stay. I like to try to keep my finger on the pulse of like new things that are coming out, things that might, you know, stir my interest or get me excited, or things that might be totally under the radar. Because again, I'm always checking out new movies, new and old, especially old, so I can kind of get over. You know, it's easy for certain things to fall through the cracks for me because I do watch a lot of movies, and I, for the most part, keep my mind frame in the classic decades of the 70s, 60s, even 50s, and of course the 80s. Mostly it's centered in the 70s and then the 80s. But that being said, I always try to stay, you know, current. And so I watch Chris Stuckman's channel for that reason, because he always reviews new horror films that are coming out. And a lot of movies I never heard about, or a lot of movies that I didn't even know were coming out, you know. So I don't really watch a whole lot of trailers like I used to, because I feel like trailers really, well, as a weird marketing tool, a lot of the studios want to give away a lot of information to try to like somehow get people in the seats. But a lot of these trailers act as like almost episodic, like recaps of where you kind of don't have to see the majority of movies that come out if you just watch, say, a 2-minute trailer, because you really, you know, you see where the story is coming from, and then where it develops, where those characters go, and kind of what happens at the end to these characters. And so there's no like, you know, a good trailer should leave you wanting more, but not really knowing exactly what the hell you're watching. You know, that's the whole point of going to a movie, or like checking out a story you've never read before. You want to be enticed, you want to be excited, but that should be it. So the trailer for the Omen, for the First Omen, was like, oh, I didn't really know exactly what it was about, but I got the sense that it was a remake. And it looked okay, but I was not excited by it. So I watched this Chris Stuckman review of it, and I find that he is, for the most part, I find myself really agreeing with most of his reviews, especially newer films. Like, I would say 95% when it comes to newer films. And I've gotten turned on to a lot of newer horror films through his channel, and so it's a good resource for seeing and hearing about you know, new things that are coming out. And he really he absolutely raved about this new movie. He just saw it. He really praised it in a lot of ways, and he kind of described it in a way of where it was like a period piece, and it took place in the 70s. I think it takes place a few years before the original, and essentially it's not. And what I found out too is that it's not a remake. It's basically a prequel to the story, to the original movie. So I thought, okay, that looked interesting, and then he was talking a lot about the cinematography and the pacing and the actual horror element of this movie. And a lot of the things he said, I was like, okay, I think I'm into this. This sounds really great. It sounds like an old school horror film where it's generally going to have rich atmosphere, and it could really scare the pants off of you. So I was like, I'm kind of interested in this. I'm kind of interested. And again, most of the time, pretty much every time, I check out one of his reviews, and then I see one of the movies he's talking about, or that he has talked about, I am usually totally on board with it, and I think it's awesome. So I was intrigued. And then tonight, I just randomly went on YouTube again, and I came across an interview with the director of this film, Akasha Stevenson. And I found out it was directed by a woman. I'd never heard of her before. I guess she has done pilots and has been involved with certain kinds of series, science fiction based kinds of series and episodic TV shows. But this was her first full length feature, and I saw an interview with her being interviewed. I saw her on Collider, and I thought this woman is totally awesome. I was like, this woman is great. I loved her answers. She had this real interesting way about her. She seemed really intelligent, really smart, sophisticated, had really good taste in movies, and had some real interesting things to kind of talk about that I don't normally hear really talked about a lot. And the other interesting thing was I saw this kind of like interesting way how she got into movies. Just throwing herself into film. And honestly, almost having this interesting background, kind of similar to a degree of my favorite director of all time, and that is Stanley Kubrick. She came from the realm of photojournalism. And Kubrick came into film after being a very seasoned professional photographer. So I thought there was some, in the way she kind of got into film later, a little bit later in life, and how she fell into it without really having a plan, which in reality, I saw there's like kind of two parallels between, even though it can kind of be a stretch, but I saw immediately these two interesting parallels between what she was kind of talking about and what I know about Stanley Kubrick. And so that was even more interesting, and I was like, okay, I gotta see this movie now. So I'm really excited to have found out about this movie, and I think it's going to be at least something very different than what I had, previously thought of the film. I don't think it's going to be. It's definitely not a remake. It's going to be something different, and it's going to be a new, I guess, vision in this universe. That much I say pretty confidently. Whether it's good, I have to see it, but I think it's going to be a different. There's going to be a different approach to this movie that we, as fans of horror, we haven't seen before, especially when it comes to The Omen, which is a pretty huge franchise. So I'm kind of interested. I'm kind of, well, I shouldn't say I'm not kind of interested. I'm really excited actually to see this. And I haven't been excited about a new horror film, especially that's out right now in the theater, because it is out now. I looked it up and it's playing locally, so I'm going to really try to go see it. And it seems like a movie that is, something that could be really good to see on the big screen. So in the next couple days, I will do a review for the First Omen. I want to watch it again first, because it's been a long time. I love that movie to death. I've never talked about it before. And this whole new film that's coming out has gotten me excited about The Omen again. And I want to try to squeeze in a review for the classic original before I see this new one. So stay tuned for that. I'm hoping I can see it maybe next week. We'll see what happens. Maybe sooner. We'll see. But yeah, so I just wanted to do a kind of, an impromptu video on an unexpected thing that has kind of shifted for me as far as excitement about a brand new horror film. So this is Jason Dean, and we will see you next time. Peace.